Howdy, tubalcain back again, and this is video tips number 397 part 2, and it's a continuation, so be sure and watch part 1, which is 396 if you have missed it, regarding building this pattern for a sand rammer. So a lot more in store in this video, and I'll hope you enjoy it, and be sure and watch 398 as well, where I take this Foundry pattern and ram it up in my home foundry and turn wood into aluminum, just like magic. Glad you joined me, so let's get on with it. Well, a lot's been going on here that I haven't shown, and I've been sanding at least this end from about here on toward the headstock with 3 grades of paper, coarse, medium, and fine. I may go back with extra fine, but I don't know if it's necessary. I don't want to overdo it. I filled the hole right here with a dowel, but I think I need just a little bit of Bondo there like I did here. I overcut here with the bandsaw, so I had to fill some of that, and I hope it turns out all right. And I'll still have another hole to plug. And as you can see, the 2 1/4-inch holes that I drilled for the alignment pins really weren't quite in the right location. I should have had them farther outboard on each end, but oh well. So what I'm going to do now is swing the compound around to the right at 60 degrees to put this angle on, and they won't necessarily be the same as this. I'm gonna put an angle like this on the other end, and then this will all be sawed off to width on the bandsaw much later on. And one other thing that I did here is I took this down to 2 3/4. You might remember that it was 3 inches, and that seemed a little bit too big because the whole idea here is I want a small rammer. So this end also needs to be turned down a little bit, although we'll see how that goes. I know I changed my mind a lot, but that's my prerogative, I guess, as the pattern maker. And this will not totally resemble the original aluminum one. I'm really straying from that design, but I think it's going to still look good in appearance and be very functional. Remember that on this side that this is way too long, and I'll be reducing it to about where my thumbnail is. And some of you are probably thinking, why are you wasting all your time making a pattern? You should have just made a wooden maple rammer and forget about the aluminum one. Well, maybe you're right. But one thing I wanted to point out here, if it shows up, and I think it does in the video here, the grain that you see here is just so very typical of maple. So if you're ever wondering what kind of wood that you're working with, and notice that it doesn't appear that way all the way around, but that is characteristic of a hard maple, a wonderful wood. Not a lot of odor here as I'm turning it, but then again, this piece of wood is probably 50 to 70 years old, well seasoned. Talking too much. I know I'm not showing all of this because it's just making the video too long. This is rather time consuming because now I'm plugging this hole with a 1/4-inch dowel, the same as I did on the other side, and that has to dry, otherwise this will fly out. And I had to be careful not to push that too far in. I just want the end of the hole plugged, and then I'm also probably going to need just a little bit of body putty there even after that's done. And as you can see on this end, it looked very good, but then I put just a little bit of Bondo on there to fill a little imperfection. But what I did on this side, and I will do on this side, but it also will be off camera, is I use this tiny little X-Acto type saw, and I've had this for 40 years and never used it, but that was just the nuts for sawing that off because it's so fine. And so I'll use it on this side after that glue is dried. Also, I had a couple low spots in various places there that I filled with body putty, and in the end you're not going to see that when it's translated to metal, and I'm sure that the old pattern makers did that plenty. And Freeman made a product that was called Tuff Fill, Tuff Fill, and I believe it was nothing more than Bondo with their brand on it, but I don't have any of that, so I just use plain old Bondo from AutoZone. So I'm progressing nicely, but again, there's a lot of downtime here waiting for things to dry. So be back in a little while after that is done. I still have to turn this to diameter and shape this a little bit better. You can see that the final shape I bring into compliance with double cut file. You could use a rasp and coarse sandpaper, and again that's just to whatever appearance that you or I should want. Well, that's about it for the lathe work. And notice that I made a groove here and a groove here, and that's going to be where it gets cut off. This will be the round end, and this is the flat end as shown on the aluminum one. I'm ready to take it out of the lathe, and I might clean it up a little bit, get the dust off of it, and give it an initial coat of sealer or something, whatever I have here. And boy, that's got a good feel to it. Whatever I got here on my shelves, and my hand fits in there pretty well. Remember that later, there's always one more step in pattern making. I'm going to take the leather fillet and put it in all of the corners like that. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 corners. Then I will split it. I'm going to split it before I do the leather work. And I thought that I would, like I say, seal it before I split it. So that's probably all I'm going to do for today. We're going out and have a pizza. It's an hour or two later, and I put 1 coat of spray primer on there. It's good for wood or metal according to the can. And the reason I have it in a lathe now, and notice that I've got it held in the chuck here, and is that it's just easier for me to use a little fine sandpaper or steel wool to get rid of the roughness, and then I'm ready to take it out and to split it. Now it will take some more painting later on because I'm going to expose some raw ends and so on. Now I'm ready to split it on the parting line, and that's always kind of tricky for me because I'm afraid that it's going to splinter, especially here in the thinner spots. Is it going to break as I try to spread it? So I like to start with this knife and just drive it into the parting line with this. But the reason that I didn't cut this off the length yet, here or here, is I thought, well, if I butcher a little bit out here or splinter, it doesn't matter because this is throwaway here on the ends anyway. So in some ways this is like splitting firewood. And you can see it's starting to separate here, but not over here yet. And the idea is that the paper that's in there is what's going to yield, and should be half a sheet of paper on each side when I'm done. Note on this side how it's starting to split away from the parting line, and that's what I didn't want to happen down here in the good piece. This is scrap out here. Now I've resorted to using a screwdriver, which is a wedge. and it's starting to split nicely. Ta-da! That was a tough one. I think I used too much glue, or I probably should have used just the cheap white glue rather than carpenter's glue, but that's all I had. But that was a tough one to get apart. Now what I'll do is take a great big sheet of sandpaper, actually it's an old sanding belt, and I just like to do this back and forth. That'll get rid of some of that paper. And now you can see the alignment pinholes. And of course that's waste stock. So, how'd you like that? And now I am quitting for the day. It's the next morning, 7 o'clock, and boy was that pizza good last night, and I'm back with refreshed energy, and I'm full of coffee and so on. Anyway, this is an old sanding belt. You know, sometimes they just snap and break, you know, when you put them on because the glue is dry. So I saved some of those because they're just as sharp as can be, and it's just the nuts for this operation. And the whole idea is to remove the majority of that paper and smooth it up. Not critical at all. And I'll do that to both halves. Now, for the next step here, I've already put one of the leather fillets in here, so that's what it's going to look like. Let me just do one or two others on camera, and the rest will be done off camera. But the purpose of the fillet is several-fold. One, to remove sharp corners. We never really want sharp corners on Foundry pattern because it's a source of tearing and shrinking and so on. And also, I like the looks of it, and that'll all blend in when I'm done. Now, fillet can be made from leather, which I'm going to use, wax, wood, plastic, just all kinds of things. And I often have used a Bondo, and along with my fillet iron, that can be done also. And these irons have different diameter balls to give you different radii. So that's the gist of it. I give a lot of related material in my videos, perhaps too much, but let me talk a little bit about fillet. And it's not fillet, we say fillet. Here's some Freeman wax fillet, and my friend Chet Jacobs some years ago gave me many boxes of this, as well as the leather, but this is what it looks like, and it's number 2, the size, and there's a whole box of it, and the whole thing is you use a fillet tool, a fillet iron that's been heated with an alcohol flame, or they even sell electric ones, and it melts it right into place. And this is made of beeswax, an interesting material. Then in the old Kent Collins catalog, and by the way, that was Freeman. I told you that was one of the big suppliers. I believe they're long gone, but there it is again from Kent Collins, and it comes in a roll too, a spool. And then on the next page they are showing the leather, and I have many bundles of these leather fillets also from Chet, and it comes in many sizes. There's 2 sizes. The smaller one there is what I'm going to use. It takes glue real well, and again pressed in place with that fillet iron. And there are the fillet irons for sale. They call them fillet tools. And you can get it in wood also, fillet material, but of course that would be like straight pieces only, and it would be, it's just like molding is what it is. You can see all of the other materials here. And since this catalog is very old, it doesn't show any of the plastic, but they make plastic fillet also that is very flexible and it glues in place. I do not like it. I don't have any in stock, and I didn't care for it. I like the leather. Alright, here we go. I'll do one fillet for you, and I just use yellow glue or white glue, it doesn't matter. It takes glue real well. I like to get some right in to the corner here. Holy mackerel, did you hear that noise? I think it's Henry upstairs playing with his blocks. Sounds like thunder. And then I like to take a little bit of glue on the fillet itself. Spread it generously. Now you notice I'm wasting a lot of this. I got this much longer than I need, and I don't care because I must have 1,000 feet of this, and I've only got 5 years to live. So, and this may be the last pattern I make unless a lot of people watch this. And I often think that I'm talking to myself, but I know that isn't true. So I put it into place like that. And the reason I left these pieces long is this, it's like a pigtail. I can pull on them down here to get it to conform. And then when it dries, I won't show that, but I would use my gem single edge razor blade and just take it right off there. But now using my fillet iron, I just press it into place, and it's going to slide around a little bit until that glue starts to get tacky. And you want the fillet to be approximately 50% on the flat and 50% on the vertical for appearance. But it's kind of slick if you've never seen this material before. Now, remember I told you many years ago that pattern makers were considered the exalted craftsmen. I don't pretend to be one myself, but there was always a good explanation or several paragraphs in one of those pattern books entitled The Exalted Craftsman, and it went on to tell all the different skills that a pattern maker had to have in order to execute this. Now, I never have in this video talked about shrinkage at all, because it's kind of irrelevant, because we don't really care whether this pattern is 10 inches long or 10 and a 32nd inch long, but the pattern, the final casting will be perhaps 4% shorter than this, because aluminum shrinks at the rate of about 3/32 of a foot. Let me show you right now, while this is drying, a pattern maker's or shrink rule. So hang on while I dig those out. I've talked about them before, but that's how you do fillets, not fillets. Fillet is when you clean a fish. Here's a Lufkin. I like my Lufkin tool, shrink rule, and this particular one is a 1/16 of an inch per foot. Now, from a distance, they don't look any different, but they're always marked as such, and you would use a different one for each shrink rate. And here's some more, all different, but notice this now. When I stack them like this, I'll hold that up. Even though they're all even on this end, notice that they're different lengths, so that the pattern maker would select the rule that he is working with as far as what the final product will be. Will it be brass or iron or aluminum? The correct shrink rate, and use this to measure as he's making the pattern, and then in the end the final casting would be the correct dimensions. Otherwise it's going to be smaller if you're using a standard ruler, and that may be very critical in some applications, but not in my rammer. In this old Starrett catalog, there's 2 pages of shrink rules, but on this page is a shrinkage chart telling the rate at which the various metals shrink. I know I gave you too much information here. I had a laugh. My brother had a girlfriend, this is probably almost 50 years ago, but if you talked about anything technical or just about anything, she would always say, "Who cares?" centimeters. I hope some of you aren't saying that. Okay, I got 1/2 done. By the way, my brother was forced to dump that girl, and he used to call her the ravishing redhead. She was quite good looking, but you know, looks just aren't enough. Now while this is drying, while the glue is drying, I'm going to go upstairs and eat breakfast. I smell omelets cooking, so I'll see you in a half hour. Alright, all of the fillet has been shaved off here with my gem razor blade, and it's looking pretty good. I might have a little filling and sanding because there are some rough spots on the leather caused by the glue. But I need to turn my attention now to the alignment pins, and I've already installed one. And let me talk about what professional pattern makers would use. Out of the catalog here, they made all different sizes of dowels, and they have both the male and the female. Notice that these aren't really even round, and you can buy them by the box, any size you want, different material, tools to install them. These were used for core boxes also. Now I had a whole bunch of these at school that I salvaged from old Anthony patterns, but I suppose they got thrown away with everything else. But what I use, because nobody's going to do this at home, but I just wanted you to see in the related information that there are products made especially for that. But what I like to do is take, and I prefer metal over wood, but since this pattern is only going to be used one time, it really doesn't matter. But wood expands with the glue, and it swells and it changes shape, and so I like to use aluminum. And I put, these are 1/4 inch holes, as you recall. I put a 2-degree taper on there on the lathe for a distance of perhaps 1/4 inch, because you want the pins to release as you separate the cope from the drag and not pull the pattern out of the cope, if that makes any sense to you. So I've already installed one here, and here's the other one that I made, and it's hard to even tell which end is the tapered end, but in it'll go, and that'll take just a little tapping. Another solution, so I might need to pull these out, see, during the rest of the operation. I'm not done, and I'll get back to that when this side is ready. But the other possibility, well, you see, in the end I used tape to hold these. That helped so much while it was drying, because the leather fillet wanted to open up on me. But anyway, well, I've got those covered. But the female part here can also be drilled one size oversized, which typically is going to be about a letter F drill, and that might help you too. But if you make it too large, you're going to lose some of your alignment, and you want it to be reasonably accurate. So that's all I'm going to say about the alignment pins, but they are quite essential, and use a diameter proportional to the size pattern that you're making. In this case, 1/4. I don't know what that is in millimeters. I did a little bit of filling around the fillet with some body putty, so I took this opportunity while I still have center holes, or at least in this end, and notice how it's held with a 3-jaw chuck, and then center here, but with a worm type clamp there. So this is my last chance to do any work on the lathe with the between centers, I should say. So I lightly sanded it, and I believe I'm going to give it another coat now, right now, of the primer and steel wool it, and then I'm going to chop it off, because at that point I can't really do any more lathe work. It's all going to be bench work. So out to the paint booth again. I put another coat of primer on here and steel wooled it, I should say. Now I'm ready to cut these off to length, and you know, I really hate doing that because I feel emasculated once I remove my center holes. But the idea here is to cut this off approximately here. It doesn't really matter. The thicker it is, the more weight that I have, inertia, when I do the ramming, but I will cut it on the bandsaw at 3 degrees, both of these. This is the same end. This is the round end that I'm dealing with right now. And then I'll take it over to the belt sander and sand it so that both are the same length, more or less. If it's a little bit off, it doesn't matter all that much, because ultimately, remember, this will be a casting, and the casting is going to be faced or dressed off, so it is perfectly flat. To the bandsaw. I'm at the Delta 14-inch bandsaw, and I have tilted the table at 3 degrees. I'll take off a little more. Similarly, at the 6x48-inch Rockwell Delta belt sander, set at 3 degrees, I'll produce the pattern draft on there. Now, I really wish I had a brand new, very coarse belt on there, because the end grain on maple is just so hard. Well, great. Now my whole basement smells like burnt maple. But anyway, can you see the pattern draft 3 degrees? Let me get this apart. And here's my I guess I'm at about 2.5 degrees, but that's all right. So this end is now done. Now to tackle this end. Remember that this end is going to look something like this. So I have to do really 2 things. One, cut it off the length, and then reduce it from round to flat. And that'll be a combination of sawing and planing. So, and this end kind of makes me tense. I'm not sure how to approach that. Let me think it through, and I'll be back presently. I cut the ends off to approximately the length that I want. Again, this is the flat end. Now, look, I've got it marked here in pencil, and that'll be the overall thickness here, but that's really too thick. I've got it about 1.5 inches. And this is only about 1 1/8 inches, so I'll probably reduce that more. But initially, and if you can follow the line clear around here, you can see where I'm going to saw that off. So I'll saw that off, and that's just going to be rough sawn, and then I'll show you how I'm going to finish that off. But I don't want to run into this business down here, so that's what's concerned me. And for those interested, this is my setup for making that cut using an angle plate. And I squared up the table so it'll be a square cut. Okay, how's that? Now I know this video is incredibly long, and I will consider making an ADD version of it, but last time I did that I had complaints on that, so you just have to bear with me because it's a complicated project for something that's as simple as it is, but that's what it looks like, and I think that's still way too thick when you compare it to this, but as I said, I didn't want to run into this. But this is rough sawn and very poor finish. So rather than putting it on the milling machine, which I could do, and mill these down, that would true them up, but it wouldn't produce a very fine finish, I'm going to introduce you to something here, and that is the Wagner safety planer. If you've never heard one, and I've had this since Noah came over, well, I should say, well, Noah didn't come over in the Ark. Columbus came over on the... All right, I've had this since Columbus arrived. And anyway, this is the Wagner safety planer. And here's the original brochure. Wagner safety planer. 25 bucks, 22 bucks I paid for that. It was equal to 100 bucks when I bought it. But you know, the good thing about this is absolutely, positively is safe and impossible to grab or kick back. There's thousands in use. So let's step over to the drill press and I'll show you how this is used. I've been thinking about this for a while, and what I'd like to do is taper this. That is, this end a little thinner than this end. So I've got the Wagner safety planer set up in my Duro drill press, and I have the table tilted at about, I have it tilted at 5 degrees. Fairly high speed, and the idea is just to run this through here without it flying out of my hands, although it claims that it can't happen because it is a safety planer. Can you see the angle? And I'll continue until I get it to about the thickness that I want. Leaves a fairly good finish. Not great because this is used in dull, semi-dull, semi-sharp. Okay, I sanded this a little bit. I probably should even take it down a little bit thinner, but I like the appearance of that taper. However, we got still about 1.25 inches there, which is a little more than even this, although that's got that rubber thing on it. But the whole purpose of this project, and consequently the video, was to reduce the size of this for my small flask. Like, you know, that barely fits in there. And to some extent, this does fit in there. But here's what I'm going to do. I still have to trim this off a little bit here and put the pattern draft on the end, and then possibly paint this and I'm done. I was considering also reducing it here in width, but I like the radii on there, radius, so I'm going to leave it go, and I'll tell you why. I will go ahead in the next video and cast up one of these, and then I may modify it and cast up another one. That, by modify it, I mean I may reduce the width and the thickness here on the pattern, or some of that could actually be done by sawing the aluminum. Not so much the width here, that would be kind of awkward, but it would be very easy to chop this off a little bit. And I had considered making this square rather than long, but I think that's going to work all right. So, all right, those are my thoughts on that, but you know, this is like, I'm not an artist, but you know, sometimes an artist making a painting or a sculpture doesn't know when to quit. So let me go over and trim this a little bit. But did you like the Wagner safety planer and how it worked and how I set it at a taper? I thought that was a pretty good idea, and it just occurred to me at the very last minute. And there's my plug. And I got a dull sanding belt, and boy, that maple is hard. It's just about done. I drilled a total of 4 holes, 1, 2, 2 holes in each piece, and the purpose of that is so I can put a drywall screw in there when I'm removing this from the mold, and just helps me to extract the pattern. Now, you don't want any sharp corners on a pattern, so I've already softened all of the corners like that, a little bit of a chamfer. And I'm going to go out in the garage and put a little more paint on this. Not that it's probably necessary, but just makes it look finished, I guess. And it's primer, so I'm not going to use any other color than this, because remember, it's still only a 1 of. So let me do that, then come back in after it's dried, and that will be the conclusion of this extremely long 2-part video. Well, that pretty much wraps up the video and the project, and I went from large to small. I'll be sure and watch the follow-up video when available, where I make a casting of this and finish it off, and maybe even try it out, see how it works. Again, a split pattern, not made from a blueprint. Of course, a master pattern maker would be working from drawings, and I'm just scaling down. And you know, this took 8 or 10 hours. I've been working on it for 3 or 4 days. Just takes a lot of time. So I was thinking, if I had a 3D printer and it was the capacity to build something that's, what, 12 inches long or 11 inches long, how quickly could that be laid up on a 3D printer and then a casting made from it? And that's just a thought, but I'm a little bit too old to tackle 3D printing, because I would have to learn CAD. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the build, the project, and the video. If you liked it, be sure and comment, give me a like, thumbs up, and subscribe. And this is tubalcain saying so long. I'll see you in my next video.